What is going on, Trash Talkers? We're back with another episode for you. In today's video, we're going to be talking about players that are going to be on the roster bubble for each team in the AFC South. All that and much more coming your way right now! All right, Nick, as we continue this series today, we're going to be talking about the AFC South and players that may or may not be on the roster as the regular season gets started. As we've seen that there's been some cuts already, and we've seen a lot of players already on the roster bubble, or at least being told that they're going to be on the roster bubble. So I want to take a look at some of the players for the AFC South, specifically with the Colts, where we have wide receiver Desmond Patton, tight end Jack Doyle, and offensive tackle Julian Davenport. Out of these, which do you believe is the biggest name for the Colts?
Yeah, you got some big names on the offense, but none really bigger than Jack Doyle, who's been a starter for the Colts for many years now. And with the addition of Mo Alley Cox a couple seasons ago, he's really been a standout starting last season. They really expect Mo Alley Cox to be a big part of the offense this year, and Jack Doyle has just not been who he used to be. Plus, there's a guy of the name Trey Burton who was big for this team last year, who is still a free agent, and also has a rapport with Carson Wentz from his Philly days. I believe that Trey Burton is also a threat to Jack Doyle's position right now because Jack Doyle is just not performing at the level he used to. And he's a guy you should definitely look out for during roster cuts.
Absolutely. I also want to take a look at Desmond Patton because he's such a big name as well. The speedster for the Colts is really just one guy that they were hoping to rely on, but then you take a look at this depth chart and you say, okay, you got T.Y. Hilton, you got Michael Pittman, you got Paris Campbell, you got Zach Pascal. At what point do you say you have too many of the same type of receiver? And I think when you have Desmond Patton, he's a redundancy to most of these guys. He's long, he's lean, and he's fast. And I think at the end of the day, they need guys that are going to be contributors on special teams, maybe some slot guys. I think that they need to mix and match a little better. So Desmond Patton, definitely a name to watch out for. All right, with the Tennessee Titans, we have running back Jeremy Mcnichols, quarterback Logan Woodside, and cornerback Chris Jackson. Jeremy Mcnichols is the one that stands out to me here because Mcnichols is the offset to Derrick Henry. And with all of the usage that Derrick Henry has gotten over the last couple of seasons, he's going to need somebody behind him. The problem is that Jeremy Mcnichols has not shown an ability to make sharp cuts. He hasn't been able to get through the line of scrimmage. He really hasn't been able to do much as the offset back. So I believe that the Titans are looking for another opportunity where they can bring somebody else in, and they did just that with the draft. So I believe at the end of the day, Jeremy Mcnichols is going to be one of those guys that just says, there's no spot on this team for you because you can't do the one simple thing we're asking you to do. And maybe it's because he doesn't have that regular amount of carries or whatever the case is. Maybe he needs to go to a system where he can get the ball a little bit more. But either way, he's not going to be in Tennessee all that much longer.
For the Jacksonville Jaguars, they've got wide receiver Philip Dorsett, who is a new addition to this team, but because of the wide receiver depth they have on this roster, he might just be a veteran role player that does not see any time, and he may be cut to save some cap. Another guy to look out for is Tim Tebow, who has always been on the roster bubble, and he's looked fairly decent so far in training camp, but he still has a long way to go, and only time will tell whether he makes this roster or not. Then we have linebacker Dylan Moses, who's a rookie this year, but he is coming in with an injury, and he might not make this roster, but I think that he might be safe if they place him on the PUP list. That way he doesn't take up a roster spot, and he can live to see next year's training camp. And finally, we have the biggest of them all, Taven Bryant, the big defensive tackle that was a first-round pick in 2017. He was poised to take over last year as the number one defensive tackle for the Jacksonville Jaguars, but he just did not perform as expected. He was not everything that a first-rounder is supposed to be, and he is somebody that the Jacksonville Jaguars are keeping on a short leash. He may be somebody that does not make this roster.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of big names for the Jaguars there, but At the end of the day, names aren't what going to get you on the field. And if they can fill those names with somebody that's willing to do the dirty work and maybe get the job done, then it's worth taking a look at possibly moving on from a potential first rounder. All right, taking a look at the final team that we have here with the AFC South, we have the Houston Texans. The Houston Texans are looking at players like David Johnson, Mark Ingram, and Chris Conley as potential cuts. We're taking a look at the running back position specifically, especially with all the other additions that they brought in with Rex Burkhead and Philip Lindsay. There's so many running backs on this roster that it is hard to really figure out who's going to get the line share of the carries for this team. And I believe that when it's all said and done, you're going to take a look at David Johnson or Mark Ingram, and one of these guys will not be on the team. Mark Ingram did sign a 1-year contract, so his cap hit is going to be a lot less if you were to cut him versus David Johnson, who signed a multi-year deal and he still has some time left on the cap. Maybe you don't want to cut him for that reason. Either way, there's going to be some shakeup in this running back room, and I don't expect either one of these guys to be on the roster. And then wide receiver Chris Conley. Conley is one of those guys that came over from the Kansas City Chiefs, and he has had a really interesting career because he's been on one of the most potent offenses in the NFL, but he has had very little opportunities. And you can either chalk that up to the fact that you have players like Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, Mecole Hardman ahead of him, or you can chalk it up to the fact that he really just never lived up to the hype that was surrounding his name. He never really became the player that we all thought him to be. I believe the latter. I believe he is going to be one of those guys that just doesn't show up. He's not going to show out during camp, and he's going to be somebody that the Texans take a hard look at and say, with players like Brandon Cooks and Anthony Miller, Kiki Kuti, and draft steal Nico Collins, I believe that Houston Texans have the depth that they're looking for at the wide receiver position. And Chris Conley is just not one of those guys that's going to be jockeying for a roster spot here.
Yeah, I agree with you. I do believe that one of these running backs will be cut, and I believe it's going to be Mark Ingram because he has not been performing great the last few years in a system like the Baltimore Ravens that is made for running backs. He did not do that well, and I think that he is a guy that is on the downside of his career. Mark Ingram is not who he used to be, and with the depth at this position, he's somebody that I could see doesn't make the cut.
All right, well, I want to hear from the trash talkers. I want to hear from you guys. Let us know in the comments down below for every team in the AFC South, or at least one of the teams in the AFC South. I want to hear what guys you have being cut or on the roster bubble, even guys that we didn't talk about. I want to hear your thoughts. All right, well, that's going to be all for now. Thank you all for watching. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit that notification bell. We go live every single day. That'll be all. Peace and love.